Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of webinars which we've put together specifically for the NHS. And the purpose of these webinars is to educate yourselves and help you understand some of the technologies at play at Microsoft to help you transition successfully to Windows 10. The only other thing to add is that this session will be recorded, so you will have access to it post this webinar, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar. And my colleagues will be able to try and answer some of those questions. And what we'll do at the end of the session, we will try to answer some of those questions for the benefit of all that have attended today. So without further ado, let's crack on. My name's Asif Amin. I work for Microsoft Services, and my role at Microsoft is to help and assist organizations to transition to Windows 10. Some of the focus areas that I cover specifically are System Center Configuration Manager, Microsoft Intune, Enterprise Mobility Suite, and of course, Windows Analytics. So let's proceed. So Windows Analytics is a cloud service. We like to call it a suite because it's a suite of different solutions, and specifically those solutions are upgrade readiness, update compliance, and device health. Now, upgrade readiness can be used to monitor and track your Windows 7 devices. It does work with Windows 7. Update compliance and device health are geared more towards your estate that has now successfully moved to Windows 10, and to actually understand what's going on in your estate from a security update perspective and a feature update perspective. Device health is all about trying to understand the performance of these devices and how the applications are performing on this new operating system, Windows 10, and also to analyze if there's any concerns or considerations that you need to look at around the performance of drivers on these machines. So Windows Analytics, as I said, is a cloud service. You don't have to put any agents on these devices to deploy the technology, and it will work quite happily with your current infrastructure, whether you're using on-premise Active Directory, or whether you are transitioning to Azure Active Directory, if you have System Center in play in your organization, and it will work with Intune. It will also track applications, whether they be the traditional Win32 applications or the modern apps known as store apps. Now, the big benefit is that this cloud service is free, so there is no charge to you. So we encourage you to start having a play, maybe set up a trial version or go straight into production, but there is no charge. The only caveat to that is that device health, you will need an E3 license, which I'm assuming that a lot of the NHS already have. So I want to talk a bit about how organizations historically and today have been tackling a operating system upgrade. So typically customers will have this ad hoc approach of doing a manual inventory of the applications and really trying to get a list of all the applications, because quite frankly, the biggest roadblocker to transitioning from an old operating system to a new one is applications. So what Windows Analytics does around that is it provides a comprehensive inventory of your applications and add-ins, and also the drivers that you have in your client estate, to put it in a meaningful way within the workspace, as we will see in the preceding slides. So typically organizations will have this exhaustive process of going through each and every application, testing every single one, and then doing a full pass on the app list. And once they're happy with all of that, they proceed. What we're saying at Microsoft is that let's look at the perspective from a holistic view. Let's look at what are your priority applications. Let's focus on those first, and then the smaller install base of those applications, let's just park those for now and focus on the applications that really matter and that will help you move your operating system upgrade a lot quicker, and not let these smaller, low install count applications become a sort of roadblocker. So again, today, the way organizations approach operating system upgrades is they will typically create a reference image, they will customize it to some extent, and then they will tweak it, and then you have a gold image. This is quite a manually intensive process. It involves quite a bit of tweaking and playing around before you get to that final gold image. Now, with the technologies that we have at Microsoft, whether it be Intune or System Center, what we are saying is that let's start actually talking about in-place upgrades where you don't necessarily have to continuously maintain that image, but it should be a process where it is an iterative process that is to some extent automated. So you have two options within System Center Configuration Manager, if you have that in your state, which is the in-place upgrade option through a task sequence, or through the servicing option in System Center Configuration Manager. So as I said, we get a comprehensive list of our applications traditionally, and we will try to do a full pass on that list, and then we press the red green button, and then we're good to go. What we're saying is that let's start working the way we push our security updates in our organizations. So typically what organizations do is on Patch Tuesday or Patch Wednesday, security update comes out. They will do a pre-release or pre-deployment to a small collection of devices. Once they're happy with that, then they go for the broader deployment. So what we're saying is for organizations to start gearing towards the red button approach, where you automate things to some extent, but you still have that level of control, because obviously we cannot treat operating system upgrade the same as deploying security updates. So one of the first things to mention, I guess, is around privacy. Because Windows Analytics is a cloud service, it relies on the ability of client machines to upload their diagnostic data up into the Windows Analytics cloud service. Now, some organizations will be apprehensive about the frequency of the data that's being uploaded and the level of information that is being uploaded to the Microsoft cloud services. So we want to be open and transparent about how seriously we take your data, and we have a large element of control, and we fully recognize that security is a big consideration, especially now that GDPR is out, and we go at quite lengths to document and make this information publicly available around the data that we collect from these devices. So just to reiterate, the Windows Analytics is a cloud service, and it does rely on the fact that machines would be uploading their telemetry data up into the cloud. So I think we've talked about the privacy, and we've talked about data, and we've talked that the Windows Analytics relies on the ability to upload data into the cloud service. I think at this point it would be good to show you higher level how the data flow operates or the mechanics behind the scenes of Windows Analytics. So typically what will happen is diagnostic data is sent from these devices to the Microsoft Diagnostic Data Management Service. This is hosted in the US, and the data is sent by configuring your data telemetry data level and setting the commercial ID, either using group policy or Microsoft Intune or System Center or a deployment script which we provide. So Initially, an IT administrator creates a Azure Log Analytics workspace, and they can choose the location of where that's going to be hosted from a data center perspective, and we're talking Azure now. They copy the commercial ID, which is specific to your organization, and then they push this commercial ID to the devices, which will eventually show up in Windows Analytics. This is the mechanism that let us know which devices should show up where and which workspace. So every day we produce a snapshot of that raw data, the data that's been uploaded from your client devices. We take a snapshot of the IT focus insights for each workspace in the diagnostic management service. These snapshots are copied to analytics specific transient storage, which is also hosted in US data centers where they are segregated by commercial ID. These snapshots are then, which comprise of raw data, are then copied to the appropriate log analytics workspace into meaningful, actionable data, which you can use to decipher and help you make your decisions around transitioning your operating system to Windows 10, or even if it's transitioning from an existing Windows 10 feature update release, let's say for example 1709, and now you want to move to 1803. So the only thing to add is that upgrade readiness is the only solution that takes user input. So what that means is, so the data that we present to you, you can have an element of control over that data in the sense that you can add some parameters in. For example, the list of applications that we present to you, you can set an importance level on those applications to say these ones are important, these ones are currently in review, and these ones are not under consideration as part of this upgrade for whatever reason. You may be decommissioning these applications. So as I said, the information is not static. Some of the information you can have the ability to tweak some of those parameters for your benefit. So we just touch upon privacy again, because I know for some organizations they can be a bit apprehensive around the level of privacy of their data, of their client machines within their trusts. So the first thing to say is that we fully recognize this, and that's why we give you an element of control. So you control what data gets uploaded from your client devices through telemetry data settings, which will be uploaded into Windows Analytics Cloud Service. So we give you about 4 options, and the first option is basic, the second one is full, and the third one is enhanced. However, since the release of Windows 10 1709, we've added a new policy, which is at a telemetry data level, which is known as Limit Enhanced Diagnostic. And what that means is that that would be the data telemetry data level that is required for Windows Analytics as a minimum to function. Again, as I said, we're fully transparent on the data that we present back to you in this workspace. And if you want to understand a bit further, because there's one thing reading documentation and there's another actually seeing it in action. So what we do is you can install what's called a Windows Diagnostic Data Viewer tool on a Windows 10 machine, and then you'll be able to see the data that is uploaded in real time, what type of information is captured from these devices, and what gets uploaded to Windows Analytics. The data upload process, we use SSL encryption and certificate pinning to transfer that data from the device up to the endpoint URLs that are required for Windows Analytics. The data is hosted in a secure data center in the US, and only authorized personnel are allowed access to the various areas of these data centers. So, as I said at the start, Windows Analytics is a cloud service. So some of you may be thinking, well, can Analytics be used as a direct client connection without a direct client connection to Microsoft? And the answer is no. It's a cloud service. There is no on-premise solution, and the devices would talk to these endpoint URLs required to run Windows Analytics successfully. So can you pick the data center location? You can for the Azure Log Analytics workspace, which we will see in the preceding slides, but certainly not for the diagnostic data management service that sits in the US. So our recommendations, and obviously since GDPR, organizations have had to revisit how they control their data and where the data is hosted. So our recommendation at Microsoft is to set the telemetry data level on Windows 7 machines to a basic level. For Windows 10 1803, we recommend that you set it to enhanced. And for older versions of Windows 10, 1709, 1703, etc., we suggest initially you set it to a basic level. If you wanted to understand further around the privacy and all the levels of control we have around data, then there's a link presented. And at the end of this slide, we'll give you a whole host of links to information which you can read at your own leisure. So Windows Analytics is all about transitioning, Windows Upgrade Readiness is all about transitioning our current operating systems to Windows 7, but it is also about transitioning from different Windows 10 versions from 1709 to 1803 as an example. So what's actually required on these clients? Well, we said that there's no agents that are needed on these devices. And so with Windows 10, all you need to be running on a telemetry data level is for it to be running at a basic level. And then we'll show you how you can do that. There's nothing else you need to do on Windows 10 devices. For Windows 7, the minimum service pack you should be running is Service Pack 1, and you would need to set the basic telemetry level to get it uploading data into Windows Analytics. And for device health, which we won't cover in this webinar because primarily we'll be focusing on upgrade readiness and update compliance, you will need to set your Windows 10 devices to a enhanced level to get that added level of information from your devices. We've already covered the fact that if you want to make use of device health, then you will need a E3 Windows license in order to make use of that solution. So there's no charge to Windows Analytics, and it's a free service. So we encourage you to start having a play with it after this webinar and start reading up and getting familiar, because this technology is going to become more and more important beyond your transition from Windows 7 to Windows 10. It's also a tool that will allow you to not only bring you up to date, but how do you continue keeping up to date with the cadences that Microsoft are going to be releasing, which is 2 cadences of Windows 10 every year. So this will allow you to move a lot quicker and to remain in an evergreen state. And the final thing to add is that Windows 8.1 is no longer supported on Windows Analytics due to GDPR restrictions. So, as I said, the devices will need to talk to Windows Analytics, and these endpoint devices need to be able to communicate with endpoint URLs. To enable telemetry data to be sent to Microsoft, these telemetry data URLs, which are listed here and which you can also find on the website, they will need to be accessible from your organization from these endpoints. So the first consideration to have, if there's any outbound traffic blockers within your organization, these URLs need to be allowed through or to be added to a whitelist. And they also need to be excluded from SSL, any SSL inspection that you have in place within your organization. If you have a proxy server, then you have a number of options on how these devices can communicate. The first one is you bypass the proxy server altogether, and you would have to configure this to allow those endpoint devices to be able to successfully communicate to those URLs. If they cannot communicate to those URLs, your data is not going to end up in Windows Analytics. Another approach, if you don't want to do that, then you could use the user authentication approach on your proxy servers and configure it so the information is uploaded using the user authentication. And finally, this is the most complex method. You would set up the machine-based authentication on your proxy servers to allow those communication to those endpoint URLs. So with Windows 10, you don't need to do anything. They already have the compatibility update. The only thing I will say and add to that is that it will be good practice to ensure that these Windows 10 devices are continuously updated with the cumulative updates and the roll-ups and the security updates to ensure that that data is continuously getting uploaded into Windows Analytics to get the real benefit of the data that is presented within Analytics. For Windows 7 Service Pack 1, you will need to install a compatibility update. This is the only prereq we have, and that's for Windows 7. You will need to install this compatibility update onto your devices, and this compatibility update is updated every quarter, so it is classed as a security update. So we recommend that when you start to look at Windows Analytics, or you want to start deploying it or enrolling your devices, that you just put this compatibility update into your monthly patching cycle well in advance of when you're looking to enroll those devices. This security update will require a restart before it will start uploading that information. Aside from that, again, same approach with Windows 10 devices. You need to ensure that you keep these devices up to date with the latest roll-ups. And the only other thing to add is that if you want to track IE site information, meaning if you want to track what URLs are being frequented by our client devices, because we want to understand when they move to the modern workplace browser, Microsoft Edge, we want to understand which web applications or business web applications users are frequenting. Then you will need to install the update mentioned, which is KB 3080149, and that is optional. So there are many ways you can enroll these devices into Windows Analytics. You could set it in a System Center Configuration Manager if you have that in your estate, and that is set in Client Settings. The other approach is that you configure a group policy and you set the telemetry level and you specify the commercial ID, and you present that to your devices, and those devices will start sending the data up. The recommended approach by Microsoft is to make use of the deployment script that we have provided specifically for Windows Analytics and enrolling those devices. So we give you two batch files, and the pilot run config batch file is really there for you to test on your devices. So you take a small portion of your devices and you configure the script, and it requires certain parameters. One of the most important one is the commercial ID key, and you push that script out through whatever method you wish to use within your organization, and it will allow you to see, can these clients successfully talk up to those URLs that we mentioned, and do they have the relevant prereqs in place in order for them to successfully upload their data into Windows Analytics. Once you're happy with that, then you can make use of the production run config.batch file. This is used for your broader deployment or your production deployment. And the benefit of using these scripts really is it does a number of checks on these devices. For example, do they have that compatibility update on Windows 7? And you can push this through System Center Configuration Manager or whatever tool you have at your disposal within your organization, and it will set the commercial ID on these devices. As I said, it will check for prereqs, but it will also give you that level of error checking, and it will dump the output of the the batch file into a log file for you to interrogate, see, did we get success on these devices? So a quick summary of what we've been talking about in the last few slides. Have a look at the Microsoft documentation around privacy and what controls we have place. Discuss with your security team or your compliance team. There may be concern quite naturally around data being uploaded into the Windows Analytics Cloud service. And if need be, use the diagnostic data viewer tool to really showcase to your security team, this is the information that is being collated from the machines, and this is what's going to be presented in the Windows Analytics workspace. Once you've done that, then you start really looking at the enrollment of these devices. You take into consideration those endpoint URLs from a network perspective, from a network connectivity perspective. You install the relevant compatibility updates on your Windows 7 Service Pack 1 machines. Again, as I said, make sure it's included in your monthly roll-up in advance, because this compatibility update will require a restart. The commercial ID, which you will obtain when you first set up your Azure Log Analytics workspace, you will have to populate that in the script or in a GPO or within System Center Configuration Manager client settings, and that will be important to segregate and to ensure that those devices are talking to your workspace specific for your organization. Start off with a small deployment, a pilot deployment, maybe 15 to 20 machines. Start using the pilot deployment script first and see what information you get back. If there's some road blockers, then you need to understand what's the road blockers that's stopping these clients talking successfully to Windows Analytics, and investigate. Go through the logs, and it does give you meaningful information. And there is information available of all the errors that are likely to be outputted, and then we'll give you information on the best course of action according to those errors. Once you've evaluated and you're happy that we've put the relevant steps in place to ensure that the data is uploading and these clients are starting to talk successfully into Windows Analytics, then we move on to the broader deployment. And for the broader deployment, you could use your tool, your systems management tool. Configuration Manager is one example. I know as organizations, some of you have System Configuration Manager in place, or you could use Windows Intune. And another process is you could use group policies to push these settings out to your client devices to ensure that they enroll successfully. Now, I keep emphasizing the deployment script, and if you were to use System Center Configuration Manager or a different systems management tool, the beauty of this configuration script file, the output that it will give you, the area codes, will be presented nicely within, for example, Configuration Manager, for you to see and track your progress on a holistic view of how the deployment is going. So we've talked at length about what steps are needed. Now let's look at the steps of what is actually required to set up Windows Analytics. We talked more on the client side, and really the first thing to mention here is that you do need a Azure subscription for this. If you wanted to trial it, I would suggest that you set yourself up with a trial subscription first, and set up the Azure Log Analytics workspace and add the relevant solutions in, the upgrade readiness solution, the update compliance solution, and if you want to, you can add the device health solution. So this slide is just showing you where you go within Azure, and you will search for Log Analytics and you will add the workspace. The only other thing to add, and just to avoid any confusion, is that Azure Log Analytics, which Windows Analytics sits on, was previously known as OMS. So OMS is now transitioned to Azure Log Analytics. So all the workings of Azure Log Analytics will be done within the Azure portal. So you search for Azure Log Analytics and you create a workspace by pressing the button below. Once that workspace has been created, it will create a commercial ID and it will create a workspace ID, which we'll talk about in the preceding slide. So you'll have a blank workspace. Once you have the workspace set up, it's quite straightforward. You will start to add in the relevant solutions. In this case, we've added upgrade readiness as a tile to the workspace or the Azure Log Analytics workspace. And you would also use the same step to look for update compliance and also for device health and add them. And this is the presentation you should find. Initially, when you first set it up, you won't see any data. This particular slide has some data in it, but all the slides, the tiles will be blank with no information because you may well not have started to enroll your devices. So once you go in and this particular slide shows that we've gone into upgrade readiness, you will need to go into solution settings at the top there in yellow. You go into your upgrade readiness settings. And here you can see the commercial ID because I've mentioned commercial ID quite a bit. This is where you will locate your commercial ID. So you copy that commercial ID, put it in a text file or however you wish, and that's the commercial ID that you would use to populate in this deployment script. You can use this commercial ID to put it into client settings within SCCM and push that policy out to your devices. And you can also populate a group policy, and that's where you'd define this commercial ID that you use. This commercial ID is specific to your organization, and there may be mention in the documentation around a workspace ID. That's not to be confused. The one you really want to be concerned with is the commercial ID, and that's what will be used for these devices to know which workspace am I going to be talking to specific to my organization. Now, if you want to initially evaluate Windows Analytics, if you notice there is a button that allows you to set your workspace into demo mode. So what that does is, once you flick that switch, it will populate upgrade readiness with test data. That will take around 24 hours, and it could be useful for you to understand further what type of information is being uploaded, what type of information am I going to get, the level of information that I'll get, and perhaps you may want to have a play and perhaps start playing around with queries and just understanding and getting a look and feel. So the demo mode is something that you can make use of. Now, in one of the earlier slides, I talked about that upgrade readiness is one of the only solutions that allows for user input. So here you would specify your target operating system. So that means is what operating system are we looking to deploy into an organization? Once you set that, then all the metrics within Windows Analytics, all the data is very much going to be geared towards that end target operating system. In this particular case, it's Windows 10 1803 version. The last button there is very useful because you've enrolled your devices, and those devices will typically take around 48 to 72 hours to eventually show up in analytics. So about 2-3 days to show up. Now you might be scratching your head and thinking, well, you know, I'm not seeing the devices that I expected to see and the numbers. So this button here will allow you to generate a report to let you know what's going on in the background. So it will give you a report of, for example, I've had 500 machines successfully talking to Windows Analytics. There may be another error code in here or a line which shows that 10 machines that you're wanting to enroll that have ran the deployment script are showing a restart pending. So you know that these devices I need to restart before they start showing in analytics. So we've given you that added level of comfort and troubleshooting methods from the Azure Log Analytics workspace. So this screenshot is really showing you where you would set the telemetry data level and the commercial ID on in group policy which you can push out to Windows 10. This particular one is for Windows 10. So we've set up Windows Analytics. We've started to enroll devices. We're starting to see devices come into upgrade readiness. And the first pane really there, it gives you a high-level summary of how your devices are doing. How many devices have we captured? Which ones devices are talking successfully, and which ones that you may need to look at. The only other thing to add here is that it will allow you to look into the apps, the install count of how many apps have we are reporting within analytics. And again, from this view, you can generate a button at the bottom, just like that blue button we showed you in the last workspace, and that will give you a report to let you know what the progress is of your enrollment of devices. So one of the first panes you'll see is to do with Spectre and Meltdown. This is in upgrade readiness itself, and we want to show you information how protected your devices are around the vulnerabilities known as Spectre and Meltdown. So three things. Microsoft recommend 3 steps on how to protect your client devices from these vulnerabilities. The first one is to check if you have a supported antivirus application running on your machines. The second one is to check, do these devices have the January 2018 or later security updates which mitigate Spectre and Meltdown? And finally, we show you metrics in the third pane on the right, what the firmware levels of the devices are and whether they have the adequate firmware updates on their machines which mitigate Spectre and Meltdown. So useful information there as a start. So Windows Analytics shouldn't just be seen as something that we present data to you and away you go and start trying to decipher the information. We want to help you. We want to guide you on the successful outcome, which is to have that target operating system. In this particular example, 1803, and we'll talk. We will guide you through steps, and the way upgrade readiness is displayed. It goes through certain steps that you need to take as considerations to move successfully to a Windows 10 upgrade ready devices. So the first one here is to identify the important applications. So we've got that data coming in. We've got a good amount of application inventory come in. And the first thing we do is we show you the count of applications, or low install count, and the purpose of that really is to say to you that, look, this is about around 2% of your estate, and the not reviewed section at the bottom, that's where you really want to be working in. The low install count is only 2%, and don't spend too much time focusing on that, because we want to start to accelerate the Windows 10 upgrade project. And if you look at the bottom there, there is an option that says assign importance, and what that means is that you can go into those applications and you can start setting importance of these applications. You might have your 20 business critical applications, and you can start defining those applications and they'll start presenting. It is a workflow tool as well, see it as workflow tool that will help you to prioritize where your time should be spent on which applications. So this view just shows you we've drilled down into one of these, one of the previous tiles, and we can see here what level of information you have. So we see the various versions of some of the Microsoft applications, and the applications that are presented here will show the version numbers as well. You can go in here and you can select, for example, you may have different iterations of Citrix Receiver Agent. For argument's sake, it will show up different versions if you have it in your state, and you could select those Citrix receiver agent instances in here, and you can do a bulk edit and assign an importance, whether it's important or not to you, how critical it is to migrating to Windows 10. And so what we're doing here is we're starting to categorize application based on your business requirements. So the next step, as I said, it can be seen as a workflow tool. We will show you amongst your client estate of the data that's been reported back to Windows Analytics, which applications you need to do something about, or which applications you may need to do remediation steps. The information that is fed, or what's going on behind the scenes, is there is a site called Ready for Windows. And what that allows you to do is you can go onto the website after this webinar and have a look. You can put in a particular application. Let's use Citrix Receiver as an example. You input that and it will tell you whether it is ready for Windows 10 1803, Windows 10 1709. So this is going to get more and more important, this particular area, and it may be worth having a discussion with your ISVs or your software vendors that create these NHS specific clinical applications, and just letting them know that there is this service, and if they start inputting and they can subscribe to this service, then it will help you in the long run in determining and knowing in advance which software is going to be supported, or which is certified to be supported on the various versions of Windows 10 going forward. The other thing that we track is drivers. Which drivers are likely to migrate successfully, which ones you're likely to have issues, and which ones you will need to approach your vendor or hardware vendor just to get some clarity. Is there a new version for Windows 10? So we give you all that information and take away the legwork for you. So we talked about the drivers, and there may be some applications here that's already got an ISV support statement to say we certify this application to be working successfully on Windows 10 1803, for example. We also have our own metrics at Microsoft, and two of them you might be able to just make out, which are highly adopted and adopted. This is information that we've gathered from our many consumers of Windows 10, and highly adopted means that that particular application is running successfully on 100,000 machines. Adopted, it is running successfully on that particular version of Windows, let's say 1803 as an example, and it is adopted on around 10,000 machines. So we look and give you a priority list of what we feel, and this is the metrics out the box already, to tell you which devices and which drivers and apps you should prioritize first as part of your testing. If you were to tackle those 142 apps and drivers, then you would actually be unblocking, in this example, 80% of your devices ready to move successfully to Windows 10. And what we do next is we look at, we've done the legwork, and we've understood the compatibility of these apps, which ones work, and we've done some remediation steps. And now we're going on to, in this step, to deploy the operating system onto our devices, and this gives an overview of how the progress of your deployment is going, how many devices are ready to upgrade, which ones will not upgrade, and then you'll have to drill down deeper, and which ones are currently under review. On the right hand side, we see computer groupings. If you wanted to categorize your devices, maybe you want to categorize them on hardware vendor or just Windows 7 devices, you can do so. If you were to integrate Windows Analytics with System Center Configuration Manager, you could populate this area with already built SCCM collections, and we're not going to talk about that today, but this is where the information will end up. So we've deployed, as I said, and now we're tracking the progress. How many have actually updated successfully? Which ones have not started? which of these devices have deferred the actual upgrade. You may have policies in place, such as Windows Update for Business, that state that on these devices we're going to defer the latest feature release. We'll also show you in the middle pane, as you can see here, if you have any driver issues, which drivers did not install successfully, which ones the operating system blocked or stopped, and so forth. The last pane here is a feature that allows your end users on your client devices to be able to report back any issues that they have with their new operating system. You'd have to give them this new app called the Feedback Hub on their devices, and they'll be able to report back to you. For example, you've pushed out Windows 10 1803, and they fill in the Feedback Hub and give some input, and they say that we're having issues with this particular printer, for example, and that'll be collected centrally. So it makes life a lot easier for you, and as I said, it takes the legwork away. Here we just drill down into one particular report which shows the machines that failed. And if you look here, this particular device had some disk space considerations. So you may need to free up disk space on this device before it will run successfully. Two other areas, we also track Office add-ins, which can be useful information just for you to understand what add-ins you have in your estate. And if you wanted to, you could track as well the site discovery. So that will tell you which URLs are being used within your organization, and which business web applications are being used, and in what document mode or compatibility mode they're currently running at. This is useful for when you're moving from Windows 7 to Windows 10. You will have to take these into consideration because you'll be moving from to the modern workplace browser, Microsoft Edge, and you need to know in advance what compatibility issues that you're likely to expect. And so this helps with the planning around that. So we talk quite a bit about upgrade readiness, and we're just going to dwell very quickly into update compliance. So update compliance is a solution that really, you've moved to Windows 10, your estate is all on Windows 10, and now you wish to understand, what's going on in my estate in terms of security updates. And this gives you an overview of what's actually going on in terms of feature updates and security updates, and what the state of play is around Windows Defender. So this can be important because if you are transitioning from various versions of Windows 10, let's say you've implemented 1803 and now you're looking at 1809 in a few months' time, or whenever you decide, this will flag up if that particular version is now out of support, and it will tell you how many devices are out of support, and then you take the relevant actions to mitigate that and ensure that you're always in an evergreen state. So we give you that information to make your life easier. So if we drill down into one of the tabs, we see here that the status of our updates, how many of our machines are up to date, what version they're running, and if there's any issues that we need to look at. So it's quite straightforward, really. It gives you a holistic view of your quality updates, and allows you to have a high-level view of what's going on from a Microsoft security update perspective. This particular slide shows you where you are in your feature updates, what branch you are using, whether it's semi-annual or long-term service, and the purpose of this is for you to have an understanding of the different iterations that you may have in your organization that you may not have visibility of, and it just allows you to plan ahead and think about what part of the estate do we need to tackle next, and to continue with that evergreen state. So again, this was added in about 6 months ago. Some of you may or may not be aware of this. So this is peer caching technology, and it's inherent within Windows 10. We've added it into Windows Analytics because we understand that with the feature updates and the quality and security or cumulative updates, that they are larger than they were previously. So we encourage organizations to start looking at delivery option as one method of controlling that level of download of those apps. And one of our recommendation is to look of one of three options, whether you're going to look at it on SCCM, peer caching, or branch cache. But delivery optimization is something that you should look at as part of your approach on how we're going to manage these software updates. And the metrics we see here show us how, assuming that you've set up delivery optimization, how that's performing in your estate, how much bandwidth savings we have, and where these machines are getting their update and metadata from, and how much peer-to-peer caching is going on within your network. This final slide just shows around Windows Defender, how many devices are protected, how many have remediation steps that they are running on these machines, and is real-time protection on or off. So we've covered quite a bit, and there's a fair element to take on, and all that we say is that Windows Analytics, it's constantly being developed, and we're quite excited about this technology because we're adding to it, and we're going to continuously add to it. And the future roadmap is looking good in terms of some of the feature sets that you'll see at some point coming through if you set it up. And I just wanted to share some of those with you. So with a Windows 10 project, Office upgrade goes hand in hand. So we will also present information around Office servicing and deploying, and what you have in your state, and the versions and the cadences, etc., similar to what you've seen there. We'll also start to give presentation on information around line of business applications. That's applications specific to your organization or clinical applications, and that's going to be done by a tool called Application Health Analyzer. We continue to have that integration with the System Center Configuration Manager and Intune for them to work in tandem, for you to really make use of your Microsoft investments and to leverage the benefits of using both the technologies. We will also be adding deployment plans where you can start planning based on your business requirements. For example, if you're looking at the latest release of Windows 10 1809, an example, in 6 months or 12 months, whatever you decide, and then you may have the approach of, well, we're going to tackle the HR department first, or we're going to tackle the finance department first, as an example. So you'll be able to start categorizing your deployment plans around Windows 10. We'll also be adding root cause and analysis, so there'll be some element of reporting of some of the metrics that we present back to you. And finally, you will be able to track your macros, which is not often always thought of when you go through a operating system upgrade plan, but you will also have the ability to track your macros to understand what is out in your estate. So we're almost approaching the end of the webinar, and I hope there's been some useful takeaways from for you to understand better what we're doing at Microsoft to help our clients. We understand that there's concerns around the frequency of the updates and the size of the updates, and how we're going to keep on top, and how we're going to maintain that evergreen state which Microsoft is stating to us, and hopefully analytics is going to be one of the tools that is going to help you do that and maintain that keeping current state of your organization. So the key takeaways from this webinar is really analytics is free. It keeps you current. It helps you get to the newer version of the operating system. It helps you stay current with update compliance, with the security updates and the quality updates, and it allows you to stay healthy with device health, which allows you to keep track of your applications and what drivers are crashing your machines. We're very much committed to your privacy. We fully understand that organizations would have concerns about using cloud services such as Windows Analytics, and we've got extensive documentation around this, and we'll share the links with you at the end of the slide. Please look through them and understand them, and then have the appropriate conversations with your compliance or security teams. There's more innovation taking place within Windows Analytics, and we're quite excited with some of the new feature updates that will be rolled out at some stage in the future. So keep an eye out on the blogs, and there should be some exciting developments. So the takeaway, I guess, from this webinar is to go and set up Windows Analytics, whether you want to do it in a production environment, whether you want to trial it, set up a trial as your subscription. There's no cost, so there's nothing for you guys to lose. And it helps you to keep up to date and allows you to support Windows 10 in this evergreen state. The only other thing to add is it is worth mentioning to your ISV software vendors to start thinking about Ready for Windows as a site, and maybe start sharing some of their information, because this is going to help you long term, way beyond moving from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So there's a number of resources here, and you will get access to this slide deck, and these will really help you with some of the key areas that you maybe start to delve deeper in. And we'll give you the links we've given here, and please read through and look at the videos. And there's some training videos here which hopefully you should find useful. So that's the end of it. The only thing I want to add is, and we'll take any questions there is which John may have. The only thing to add is that there is an email address for these webinar sessions if you have any questions, and that is windows10@nhs.net. If you have any questions, we will be sharing this recording of this webinar, and we'll share the slide deck, and depending on the number of questions, we will share a FAQ document with you as well. So thank you for your time. And John, if there's any questions, then that we can quickly try and answer, then let's hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to let everyone know that we will try and continue to answer these questions in the background, and we'll also add any into the FAQs so that you get answers to them all if we don't manage to get through them all at the moment. I will try and keep Asif here, and we'll go through and answer them so that they do remain on demand in case anybody needs to drop off. Okay, so first one, do the batch files need to run with PSExec?
There is off the top of my head, there is something in there for PSExec in there. There is something in there. So it's not just a batch file on its own. There is it's a zip file, and within that there is some tools that it uses. One of them I think is called Vortex Connection Tool, and I think there is something to do with PSExec in there. I don't have that on me to show you, but I believe there is something in there around PSExec.
And am I right in saying that there are other ways of deploying it as well, not just through PSExec? You can also do it through sort of Intune, SECM, potentially even GPOs.
Absolutely. The point I was making is there is, I think there is a PSExec binary in there within that the deployment script zipped file. But obviously, our preferred method is to use either Group Policy, Intune, and or System Center Configuration Manager.
Okay, moving on. Would the analytics point out applications which might not be compatible with upgrade to Windows 10, or just list the apps only?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that question.
So I think what they're asking is, does it basically identify applications that aren't compatible with Windows 10, or does it just simply list them out? So does it make recommendations?
Yeah, so it does both really. It lists the applications, what you have in your estate, what versions you're running, where we can with the data that we have, which is which comes from Ready for Windows, where we have that information that the software vendor has shared with Microsoft. We will be able to give you some recommendations on that, but the important stipulation is to make that is based on the software vendor's recommendation, and they say, yes, this will work with this particular version of Windows 10. We're just collating that information and presenting it in a nice way for people to make use of, to help them make the relevant decisions around those applications.
Okay, moving on. For the group policy settings, are they in currently released ADMX templates?
Yes. So if you are looking at ADMX templates 1803, those ADMX templates are there already.
Okay, is there any help to pay for it as we are a poor hospital? So I think I can probably answer that one. So there is no charge for the Windows Analytics service itself. If you have an existing Azure subscription, then you can just add the Windows Analytics to that, and there will be no additional cost incurred. If you don't currently have an Azure subscription, then you should be able to set up a pay-as-you-go or Azure Basic sort of free demo of Azure and be able to get up and running with that. And provided you don't use any other Azure services, then there should be no costs incurred. And there's been a lot of questions around Windows Defender ATP. Just to reiterate, you aren't able to access the Windows Defender ATP or Advanced Threat Protection subscription for Windows Analytics, because that's a national tenant, and you will need to enable Windows Analytics for your own local subscription. Okay, moving on. So there is a cost then, as we need to buy a subscription. Hopefully just answered that, sorry. We've got another one asking the same question. Is the application version derived from the user's device?
So the applications that is presented back to Windows Analytics, it looks at your program files directory. It will look at your add and remove program section. That's predominantly where it gets that information from the client device.
Okay, Alison's also confirmed you don't need an Azure subscription for Windows, and you do need an Azure subscription for Windows Analytics, but you do need to provide a credit card in order to be able to complete the sign-up process. But the credit card will not be charged unless you switch on some of the chargeable parts of Azure. So just to confirm that it is a free of charge service.
Yeah, that's correct. For the Azure subscription, you need to put some credit card details in. You won't be charged. And I just want to emphasize this, that Windows Analytics is a free service, because we want to encourage organizations to make use of this so they can transition to Windows 10, and we're going to see more development in this area.
So very conscious of time, and I am very appreciative that a lot of questions are coming through, so we may need to skip some of them, and we'll post them all on the FAQs after this. I've just lost the place. Right.
So, yeah, I was going to say that obviously there's going to be questions that come up in your head around, this looks interesting. There's some quite powerful metrics there. Can it do this? Can it do that? We'll share with you the documentation. We'll have a look at the common asked questions, and then we'll try to provide answers. And we will try and give you all the information that you require as best we can.
Okay, we'll go for a couple more before we wrap up. Regardless of the results it finds, these are just for info, i.e. it can't perform actions based on those results on those machines.
Yeah, I know I've mentioned it briefly in the roadmap. There are plans to have a sort of self-service IT. I haven't seen it myself, but there are plans to have these remediation steps that can remediate some of these things. So that's in the roadmap, I guess, is the best answer. But currently, it cannot do that.
I have got a couple saying that people froze halfway through, so I'm hoping this recording is going out for others. So apologies if anyone did experience any issues with it, but we will double check the recording and make sure it's all okay. With this log, in-house and office add-ins. I think you touched on that.
Yes, office add-ins. It just gives you a presentation of what office add-ins you have, Skype add-ins, etc., just to give you a visibility of what you have running on your client estate.
Okay, once the device is enrolled, will it regularly send telemetry data, or do I need to run the script on a regular basis to update the data in Windows Analytics service?
Yeah, good question. So what I suggest is that you deploy the configuration script. If you are using System Center Configuration Manager, and I appreciate that there's some organizations that don't use it, but I'm just giving that as an example. You run it, the recommendation is to run it every 30 days to ensure that you get clients talking successfully, and then you can keep track of these things. In terms of the actual client and machine on an individual basis, there is a scheduled task which runs every night to upload that data. The first time it does that, it takes around 30 minutes. That's the first time the device, when you enroll, it takes around 30 minutes. There is absolutely no real disruption to the user using the device. So that runs every night. If they've missed that, then it's going to run the following day. And also, the only other thing to add is they may be concerned around how much data is being uploaded. Initially, it's minimal, 2 megabits of data, and then everything after that is a delta update, and it's about 300 to 400 kilobits of data being sent up, so it's minimal.
Okay, I'll just wrap up with one final one. I do apologise because there are lots of questions, so we will address all of them and add them on. But for the moment, where can I find step-by-step setup instructions?
Yeah, we'll share the we share the documentation with you. I suggest that you know, some people like viewing, reading documentation. Some people like to just learn watching videos. So there is the Microsoft Mechanics videos, which talks you through the steps. There's the Microsoft Docs website, which goes quite extensively through the steps. So, you know, I've given you two approaches. If you prefer watching the videos, you can do so. And there is a blog site which is updated fairly regularly, which will give you all the resources, and it will give you step by step. So loads of resources for you guys to really get your head around Windows Analytics.
Okay, and just to say that we have pretty much run out of time, so apologies for overrunning on that slightly, but what we will do is go through the rest of the questions, make sure they're all answered, and we will upload them with this recording so that there is a full FAQ on it as well.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. And please try and join some of the other webinars, and hopefully it's been an informative session for you. Thank you for your time and attendance.